The morning my wife told me our daughter wasn't mine started like any other Tuesday. I was standing at the kitchen counter, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, the chipped one my daughter Lily had painted for me at a school art fair 3 years ago. Little blue handprints on white ceramic. I had refused to throw it out even when the handle cracked. Maya was sitting at the kitchen table, still in her robe, staring at her hands. She hadn't touched her coffee. She hadn't said good morning. I noticed all of this in the background way. You notice things when you're half awake and thinking about the day ahead. A client meeting at 9, a school pickup at 3, nothing unusual. "We need to talk," she said. Those 4 words. Every married person knows what they mean when they arrive in that particular tone. Flat, rehearsed, drained of all warmth. I set my mug down. "Okay." She looked up at me then, and I saw that she had been crying. Not recently, but recently enough that her eyes were still swollen at the corners. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond sleep deprivation. She looked like someone who had been carrying something enormously heavy for a very long time and had finally decided to put it down, regardless of what happened when it hit the floor. "Lily," she said, and paused. "Lily might not be your daughter." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a garbage truck groaned down the street. The refrigerator hummed. "What did you say?" I asked, even though I had heard her perfectly. 10 years ago," Maya began, her voice shaking now, the rehearsed steadiness crumbling almost immediately. "Your brother and it happened once. I swear it was only once, and I've hated myself for it every single day since then, and I don't know why I'm telling you now, except that I can't carry it anymore. I can't look at Lily and not wonder, and you deserve to." I held up my hand. I couldn't hear more. Not yet. My brother, Thomas. Thomas, who had been the best man at our wedding. Thomas, who came over for dinner at least twice a month and sat at that very table and laughed at my jokes and ruffled Lily's hair and called me his best friend in every speech he'd ever given. Thomas, who had been my only family since our parents died 7 years ago, within 14 months of each other. Thomas, who I had called from the hospital parking lot the night Lily was born, voice cracking with joy, saying, "She's here, she's perfect, you're an uncle." I left the kitchen without saying a word. I got in my car. I drove. I don't remember where I went for the next 2 hours. I know I ended up parked outside a grocery store at some point, watching people push carts across a parking lot, doing ordinary things, living ordinary lives where their wives hadn't just told them that their daughter might belong to their brother. The mundanity of it felt almost offensive. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Maya, then Thomas, then Maya again. Thomas was already calling, which meant she had called him, which meant he knew, which meant it was true, at least the part about the affair. Whether it changed Lily's parentage was a different question, and somehow, even in those first raw hours, that question felt like the only one that actually mattered. Lily, my daughter. 10 years old, missing her 2 front teeth until last spring, obsessed with marine biology, currently going through a phase where she insisted on wearing her hair in 2 braids and would accept no other style on school days. She called me Daddy without a trace of self-consciousness even now, even at an age when some kids had started abbreviating to just Dad. She fell asleep on the couch next to me during movies, and I always carried her to bed, even now when she was almost too heavy for it. Was she mine? I drove home. I didn't know what else to do. Maya was still at the kitchen table. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression cycled through relief and terror in about half a second. "I want a paternity test," I said. "Today, whatever we need to do." "Of course," she said immediately. "Whatever you need. I looked it up. There's a clinic that does." "Make the appointment." She nodded, reaching for her phone with trembling hands. I went upstairs. Lily was at school. Her room was exactly as she'd left it. bed half made in that particular way of a child who technically made the bed but did not particularly care about the result. Her stuffed orca whale on the pillow, a half-finished drawing on her desk of what appeared to be a narwhal fighting a giant squid. She took the conflicts of the deep ocean very seriously. I sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. The appointment was that afternoon at a clinic across town, a quiet, professional place that clearly dealt with situations like ours regularly. The staff were efficient and kind in that specifically careful way that comes from practice. A technician named Paul, soft-spoken and grey-haired, explained the process without ever once making eye contact with Maya, a kindness I noticed and was grateful for. Lily was collected from school and told only that we needed a quick blood draw for a routine check. She accepted this with the mild annoyance of a child who had more important things to think about and submitted her arm with stoic dignity, already asking whether she could go to the library after. I gave my sample. The forms were signed. Paul told us results would typically come back within 5 business days, but that they offered a rush service for an additional fee. I paid the additional fee. I drove Lily to the library. I watched her spend 45 minutes moving between the marine biology section and the mythology section, pulling books out and reading the backs and putting them back and pulling out different ones. She had my habit of reading the acknowledgements page before committing to a book. I had always thought that was because of me, something absorbed by proximity and example over 10 years of shared space. Nature or nurture? It suddenly felt like the most important question in the world, and also like it didn't matter at all. The 5 days that followed were the strangest of my life. Maya and I moved through the house like 2 objects in a slow-motion collision, not quite touching, not quite separate. She slept in the guest room without being asked. She cooked dinner every night and left mine on the counter and ate hers at the table with Lily, who noticed the tension and asked, with characteristic directness, whether we were fighting. "We're working through something," I told her. "Are you getting divorced?" she asked, with the same tone she used to ask if we were out of orange juice. "No," I said. I believed that when I said it. I wasn't certain it was true. Thomas called 4 times. I let each call go to voicemail and did not listen to the messages. I knew what he would say. Remorse, explanation, apology, the insistence that it had meant nothing, the information that it had happened once, the declarations of brotherly love that would now arrive, coated in a layer of meaning I could not scrape off. I wasn't ready. Maybe I would never be ready. My colleague James noticed something was wrong at work and asked if I was okay. I told him I was having a rough week. He brought me a sandwich from the good deli down the block and didn't push further. Small kindnesses are their own kind of extraordinary thing. On the 3rd night, Lily came and found me in the backyard where I was sitting in the dark, not really doing anything. She climbed into the chair next to mine and pulled her knees to her chest and looked at the sky. "Do you think there are fish on other planets?" she asked. "I think if there's water," I said, "there's probably something like fish." She considered this. "I think the universe is too big for us to be the only ones with oceans." "Probably." She leaned her head against my shoulder. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo she had used since she was 4 years old, because she refused all others on philosophical grounds she had never fully explained. "I love you, Daddy," she said. "I love you too, baby," I said. That was all. She went back inside after a few minutes, untroubled, having apparently said what she came to say. I sat in the dark for another hour. The call came on the 4th day, not the 5th. I was at my desk at work when my cell phone rang, the clinic's number. My heart did something complicated and lurching in my chest, and I stood up immediately and walked to the stairwell for privacy, closing the door behind me. "Mr. Navarro." A woman's voice, calm and professional. "This is Anne from Westfield Diagnostic. I'm calling regarding your results." "Yes," I said. The results have come back from the lab, she said. Would you like to come in to discuss them, or would you prefer I share them over the phone? Phone, I said. I couldn't wait another minute, and I certainly couldn't wait for an appointment. A brief pause, the sound of a file being opened. The paternity test results indicate a probability of paternity of 99.97%, she said. You are the biological father. The stairwell was completely silent. I'm sorry, I said. Can you say that again? She did, gently, clearly, without any impatience. 99.97%. You are the biological father. I sat down on the concrete stairs. I pressed my free hand flat against the cold floor beside me, because I needed something solid and real to push against. Mine. Lily was mine. She had always been mine. I drove home in the middle of the workday. Maya was in the kitchen when I arrived. She was always in the kitchen now, I think because staying busy was the only thing keeping her functional. She turned when she heard the door, and her face collapsed immediately into a question she was afraid to ask. She's mine, I said. Maya's knees buckled. She grabbed the counter. She made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not quite a sob, not quite a gasp, something broken and desperate and flooded with relief all at once. She slid down until she was sitting on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, and she put her face in her hands and wept. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I crossed the kitchen, and I sat down on the floor next to her, not touching her, but close. We stayed like that for a long time. The relief was enormous. It was also not the whole story. She being mine doesn't erase what you did, I said quietly. I know, Maya said, from behind her hands. It doesn't fix what you and Thomas did. I know. I need you to understand that I don't know what happens next. With us. I need time to figure that out, and you need to let me have it. She lowered her hands. Her face was a ruin. I know, she said again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, James. I've been sorry every single day for 10 years, and I know that doesn't mean anything, or it doesn't mean enough. It doesn't mean nothing, I said, because that was true, but it doesn't fix it either. She nodded. I'm going to call Thomas, I said. That conversation was the hardest of my life, and I have had some very hard conversations. Thomas came over that evening. He sat across from me in the living room, the same room where we had watched football together for 15 years, where we had sat together the night our mother died and the night our father died, where we had done all the things that brothers do in the ordinary passage of a shared life. He looked smaller than usual. He kept starting sentences and stopping them. I let him talk. I didn't interrupt. He told me it had happened once, in a terrible week, 10 years ago, when Maya and I had been fighting badly, and he had been at his own lowest point, and they had both made a catastrophically wrong choice. He told me he had hated himself for it immediately and completely. He told me he had been terrified of this conversation for a decade. He told me he loved me and that he understood if I never forgave him. When he finished, I sat with it for a moment. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. I understand, he said. But Lily is my daughter, I said, and you're her uncle, and that doesn't change because of this. What changes is us, and that's going to take a long time and a lot of work, and I need you to be patient with that process and not push me. He nodded. His jaw was tight. I could see him fighting to hold himself together. Go home, Thomas, I said. I'll call you when I'm ready. He left. I listened to his car pull out of the driveway and disappear down the street. 6 months later, things were neither repaired nor destroyed. They were something else. Something without a clean name that exists in the middle territory of ongoing human experience. Maya and I were in couples counseling with a therapist named Dr. Patricia Owens, a small, unhurried woman who had clearly seen everything and remained unshockable. We went every Thursday. It was not easy. It was sometimes almost unbearable. We were still in the same house, still sharing a bedroom again after 2 months apart in it, still figuring out whether what we had was worth the enormous sustained effort of rebuilding. Some days I thought yes, some days I didn't know. Thomas and I had met twice for coffee. Both times were stilted and strange. The second time was slightly less stilted than the first. I took this as information worth keeping. Lily knew nothing of any of it. She was 10 years old. She deserved her childhood intact. Someday, when she was older, there might be a conversation, an honest accounting of complicated adult decisions and their consequences and the things love can and cannot withstand. Not today. Today she was 10, working on a school project about the migratory patterns of humpback whales, requiring my assistance in printing out 17 photographs of whale tails for a display board, very serious about the placement of each photograph, unwilling to accept my suggestion that approximate symmetry was fine. "It has to be exactly right," she said, moving a picture 2 millimeters to the left with the focus of a surgeon. "Okay," I said. "Hand me the ruler." I handed her the ruler. She measured, she adjusted. She stepped back and examined the board with crossed arms and narrowed eyes, an expression so familiar I felt it in my chest, because it was my expression, the one I made when I was evaluating something I'd built and wasn't sure it was finished yet. Mine. She was mine. She had always been mine. Some truths arrive like a bomb, and you spend years sorting through the rubble, finding what can be salvaged and what cannot, learning to live in a rebuilt space that is different from what came before, but is still, unmistakably, your home. That is where I was. That is where I remain. But in the middle of all of it, in the debris of betrayal and the slow, unsteady work of deciding who I was going to become on the other side of this, there was Lily. There was always Lily. Measuring her whale photographs with a ruler she had borrowed from her father in a house that was still her home, called by a name that was still her own. That was enough to go on. Some days it was everything.